Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we look to bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector and their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry.
Joining us on the podcast today is Greg Delory, the CEO and co-founder of Heliospace. Born and raised in San Francisco, Greg's parents encouraged him to reach for the stars from a very early age. He found himself inspired by children's space books that introduced him to the idea of the wider universe beyond Earth. These early passions for space and technology led him on to gain his degree in physics and astronomy, and then later on his PhD in space physics. After some incredible industry experience, which included working for NASA on several lunar and Mars missions, Greg founded Heliospace, who are an amazing aerospace company specializing in commercial, research and development activities in the space sector. Not only this, but Greg is an advocate of encouraging more children to enter the sector through hands-on space-related activities. We're really excited to chat with Greg today as we dive into his space origin story.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Rich.
First of all, thanks for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. Excited to have this conversation with you. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. Well, if it's okay, we'll just kick right off. If you wouldn't mind introducing, I guess, where you started from the early days of Greg. Talk us through where you started in life, where you grew up, school, college, that sort of thing, and eventually how you have found your way into your early career in the Bay Area.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in San Francisco, and my parents were pretty young. They were probably best described as a combination of beatniks and hippies at the time. So I had a pretty freewheeling childhood. I was certainly encouraged to think out of the box and follow my dreams. So my mom used to read me, for example, a book called The Nine Planets, which of course, the title is outdated now. We only had 8, but back then it was an early introduction to the idea that planet Earth was not our only domain. And so I think from that point on, the seed was planted, and then going to an alternative education elementary school for a time, instead of paying attention in class, I was drawing spaceships and, thinking about just being enthralled with the idea of technology and science. This wonderful knowledge and power that we as humans could have was just intoxicating as a small child. And combine that with space exploration. I mean, how good does it get? So I caught onto this bug early in life, combination of being encouraged to follow my dreams, looking at what's on TV and being read certain books and that kind of thing. And I started out in alternative education. I went to a regular middle school, and then I ended up going to Lowell High School, which was nationally recognized for its education. So quite a journey there, from a kid who wasn't paying attention in class to going to a really tough high school like Lowell. But I kept my dreams alive, and even while going through a difficult high school, I won a contest to go to space camp, which was a really interesting camp run in Huntsville, Alabama, where you get to spend time in a shuttle simulator and all kinds of stuff. And then, improbably enough, while at space camp, I won a second contest to fly a student experiment on the space shuttle. And that's really, I think, what got me finally launched, so to speak, was getting that early opportunity while still in high school. And then I carried that work on to UC Berkeley, where I got a degree in physics and astronomy as an undergraduate. And they had a really great experimental space physics program there. And so I continued on with a PhD in space physics. So that's the short story, I think, for how I got from A to B.
Good. No, great to hear, and great to hear again, sort of different background, different upbringing. So that's awesome. I guess now that you're kind of in the space industry and you've been here for a few years now, what is it that you find yourself loving most about the space sector?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of chronicling how I got started, it starts with wonder and dreams. I think that every day I'm thankful that I get to pursue that in a very hands-on and real way. So, I specialized in hands-on experiment building, and then later, helping to put together NASA missions that actually perform the measurements and give us the data that, we need to interpret. And so that's difficult work, actually. There's lots of failure, there's lots of issues, but I also love it. So it's dividing that line between extreme challenges, but really being enthralled with the pursuit itself and the result. It's an amazing combination. Basically my love for the space science and for pursuing space exploration is what gets you through those tough moments. And I love the fact that it inspires a lot of people. It's fun to talk about. I can see people's eyes light up when I tell them about my company and what I'm doing. And so no matter how hard, our struggles may be, I'm almost comforted by the fact that I think space is on a lot of people's minds. I think everyone is a space scientist in a way, and they wonder about life in the universe and where we're going. And I love that broad appeal that it has across society and across cultures even.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And talking of that broad appeal, one of the things, and I know this is maybe a subject close to you as well, is that one of the biggest motivations why we started this podcast essentially is to try and, I guess, humanize people, may potentially be put on a pedestal from people outside of the sector, especially the younger generation that we ideally, yourself and I, would like to encourage to enter into STEM subjects and eventually into space. And the whole purpose of this is to try and make space more relatable, more accessible for everyone. So one of the hot topics at the moment across the industry right now is the kind of the constant battle for good talent. What can we be doing? So for us, we need to be impacting the change at a much sort of younger age, I think, across STEM, to make sure we sustain the growth of the industry for years to come. I think one of our worries is that space is, like you say, I completely agree, space is thriving, it's amazing, space exploration, downstream, geospatial, everything is on fire, which is awesome, but sooner or later we're going to run out of candidates. So what do you feel we should be doing sort of differently across the industry and at sort of STEM level at that kind of younger age to try and impact change now and for future generations?
It's a very good question, and I'll add that in my work with NASA on several lunar and Mars missions, I would often go out and give public speeches, in various venues about the science and the excitement behind these missions. And the first couple of times I did that, I would have people running up to ask questions, and I assumed that the questions would be about the science or about some detail. But in fact, the first questions I would get were from parents who were almost desperate, sounding, how do I get my child into this? What do I do? Because they've just seen something so exciting, and they want to understand, how someone like me or someone else follows that path. And I think you're right. Space has a formidable reputation. But you think about astronauts or anything else, you have to be perfect to touch space kind of attitude. And really, nothing could be further from the truth. And I was stunned by that question, but I had time to think about it. So I think we need to think about the nature of education, for one thing. The advice I would give is that being book smart, right? So getting great grades and going to a good school, it's a given that I think many kids can do that. But what really differentiates, I think, people is being what I call hands-on smart. It's really implementation that differentiates among those who will succeed versus those that might not. And I think that encouraging children in particular to experiment, what we call project-based learning, other hands-on activities that directly relate to space is important. I mean, I got my start not because I went to the right school, but because I just had this inspiration, this dream to pursue this activity. And I was finding any way that I could do it. And I won that space shuttle contest. And that was really, challenging, but the thing that taught me. So I think we need to give kids an opportunity, not just to learn about it, right, in an abstract sense, but to touch it, to participate. Because it's in those environments that they will learn both the reward and the challenges of doing what I call project-based learning. And we also have to inspire them. I think children are perhaps encouraged in ways that aren't always constructive You should be this person and make this much money, or you should have that title kind of thing. We really need to give children a chance to find their own inspiration, because that's what will help sustain them, through their careers and through their lives. And as part of that, combine, motivation with hands-on experimentation, are ideas like being risk averse versus embracing uncertainty. I think a lot of children might be told to get straight A's and everything will be fine, when in fact, it's more failure that we need. And I know that failure is really popular right now, and we don't want to make a temple out of it, but it really is the case that you learn from failure. And so we need to give children the agency, the license to undergo those experiences, to do that. And then on top of that, I think, there's a whole bunch of other things. There are still gender inequity issues. There are still socioeconomic ones. A lot of that's wrapped up into the general education system. But, within that system, this was the kind of advice that I would give parents. It's fine to send your kid to a great school, get them into an internship, get them into a company, get them onto a project, because that is where they will truly learn many of the skills that they're going to need to succeed. And I worry about the availability of the workforce for sure. We're having trouble recruiting right now, as many other companies are. So it is an issue. And I would say, to young people out there, desire is the number one qualification at this point. Don't hold back. There's plenty of opportunity out there, because there is such a need in the industry for enthusiastic, bright and motivated people.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think that conveniently leads on to the next part around failures and achievements, and as you mentioned, more kind of lessons learned. And I think just sticking on that kind of younger generation, encouraging failure, encouraging them to fall down and get back up again and learn. I think with the modern day social media world and all these different platforms, I think people, kids, adults, whoever it is, see the sort of the highlight reel of successes and the achievements and the kind of the end product, the end goal. They don't always necessarily see those failures and all the build up and the sacrifice that went in behind the scenes that kind of led up to that point. So just touching on that, what would you say, or what would you consider your biggest failure or lesson learned, and what did you learn from that particular failure? And on the other side of that coin, what would you consider so far your biggest achievement career to date?
Yeah, I'll warn you ahead of time. I'm one of those people, I have a hard time choosing a favorite, best, or worst anything. Yeah. But I thought of two examples that I think illustrate both my own personal journey, but also serve as potential object lessons, for anybody else looking to understand the idea of failure and success. But in general, it's a hard question, because as I mentioned earlier, I come into work and every day there's failure. People describe being an entrepreneur like eating glass, and that's some days what it feels like. And that's back to believing in the cause and the motivation. But I'll start with one example, which was my first attempt to start a business. I had had a successful academic science career. And in fact, I had done my bucket list already. I had worked on a moon mission and a Mars mission and Earth orbiting missions and all kinds of science. But so then my bucket list grew, and I started the company with the idea that I'd be getting new work that I couldn't do academically. And I thought we were a shoo-in for this particular contract. We had the right team, we had the right everything, and we put our own money into it. We started a business, a small business, basically centered around this idea. And despite all that confidence, we did not get the work awarded. We did not get the contract, and that was a letdown. I remember the sinking feeling, getting notification. But we were committed. And I had a longer term vision, and I knew this was something I wanted to do. I wanted to start a small space company and see where it went. And so this is a part persistence and part, reacting to the world out of curiosity rather than fear and disappointment. We knew that the same customer had a larger opportunity in the works. And so we immediately positioned ourselves to answer that one. And learning from the first attempt, we nailed the second one, and that second contract was 10x the revenue of the first one. And so, that was an example of just mind-blowing failure, putting your own money into a business that did not get funded, basically, and being stuck with that, to really an incredible success. And you hear that story a lot, I think, but it's just important to recognize that even us space entrepreneurs go through it. Really quickly, just a second example. I had an idea for a lunar mission that I proposed to NASA, and I knew its time had come, and we submitted a proposal. We did really well in the evaluation, but we weren't selected because a NASA center had come up with the same idea, and they were going to get the mission awarded to them in a non-competitive sense. And so that was another tough disappointment. But again, play your cards right, and you can turn failure into success. I had done so much work on this mission and the idea that I was in fact approached to help run it for the first couple of years. So I ended up working with what was formerly my competition to everyone's success. So these are all, I'd say, flip sides of the coin of failure and success, which is, I think, the most important idea that I'm trying to convey. Those were big failures. Yeah, they felt really bad, but you really have to roll with the punches in any business. And the space industry is no different. As much as I idealize it, as lofty as the goals are, there is the down and dirty work of rolling with the punches and being agile, nimble, and persistent.
Yeah, absolutely, well said. I couldn't agree any more. And I think you make a good point as well in terms of actually just normalizing it and humanizing, having failures and learning lessons and just rolling the punches you mentioned and cracking on with it and learning from those. And I think it's a bit of a psychological reframe as well in terms of taking the positives out of every situation, actually, being able to actually be in that position where there is a potential of winning a NASA award and so on and so forth. So yeah, couldn't agree more. And in terms of I guess where you're on your company that you set up, Heliospace, would you mind just sort of giving our listeners a rundown, tell them about who Heliospace are, what do they do, how do they fit into the space sector, and also be keen to hear where do you see Heliospace being in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so Heliospace is what I would describe as a small boutique aerospace company. We have really unique skills in mechanical systems, deployable systems with an emphasis on antennas, optical systems, and telescopes. We also do a lot of analysis, integration, test, and mission formulation, primarily for government and nonprofit customers at this point. We do a lot of business with NASA. And we also have, deep expertise in fields outside of this that we just haven't had the chance to apply to customers. So we're small, but incredibly versatile, given the breadth of experience of me and my two co-founders. We sort of combine small company agility, but with the capability to answer, I think, the needs of major NASA missions, as I think you'll see when I list some of the missions we're working on, all the way down to smaller and less costly ones. So we have a great degree of agility and flexibility, in terms of the kinds of engagement we can do to solve a customer's problem. And so, to give you an example, we're doing a lot of work with NASA's Europa Clipper mission. That's the next flagship mission going out to Jupiter's moon, Europa. And in fact, we're building the radar antennas for that mission. So it's a major piece of work. It's a high reliability mission. But then we also do things like small instruments for sounding rockets at a budget price. So we have quite a dynamic range. And part of what makes us successful so far is that my co-founders and I all have deep experience in supporting civil space missions and scientific space missions throughout our careers. And so we can kind of already know what many of our customers need. We can preempt a lot of the problems that come up. And most importantly, we understand the mission and we buy into it. And I know a lot of companies say this, but this is really ingrained in our DNA. We care about the success of these missions. And so we really have good working relationships with our customers from that perspective. We're also starting to serve the startup space community as well. We have one customer that we're helping out with an Earth orbital system that they need some assistance with our expertise. Just about the company itself, we are completely founder and employee held. We have no investors. We've been profitable since day one. So that's rather unique in this landscape. So we're in a really interesting time right now. And in 5 years, I hope that we have greatly expanded into developing more capable and more numerous optical systems for both Earth remote sensing and scientific observations, both looking around and out. I want to move deeper into RF systems, including communications and radar. And I think we're going to continue doing really complex mechanical systems. And one example of that is we're just starting to work on Mars sample return systems. And a lot of this would still focus on civil space, NASA-funded missions, but also moving into maybe defense and commercial customers as well. More vertical integration for sure, meaning that we depend on vendors for critical components, and we have the capability, I think, to take more of that in-house. We're already starting to do that with what's called in the US NASA Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR funding for our own components and subsystems and commercialization of those. And then thinking even farther ahead, given the kind of capabilities that we have and our mission-driven mindset, we have several spin-off company ideas that involve remote sensing systems and data products that I would see us moving into as we develop more in-house capability and the relevant technical aspects of those. I don't think that we become a 1,000-person company, but maybe a few hundred. If we keep growing at the rate that we are, we want to maintain a flatter organization and some of the nimbleness and agility that's giving us that's giving us an advantage over some of the larger companies at the moment.
Good. No, amazing to hear. And I think kudos to you guys as well in terms of turning a profit so early, and also at this point it is, I completely agree, very, very unique that you don't have any external investment. We're the same. We've scaled for the past 4 years significantly without any external investment. It's great to hear when you just it's yourself, the co-founders, rolling up the sleeves, completely bootstrapped, and getting to where you are already in such a short space of time is really unique.
Okay, I'm talking to my kind of people. I had probably heard that from Matt at some point.
Yeah,
but amazing. Then you understand the feeling clearly.
Yeah, no,
and the problems.
yeah. When you said eating glass, I was like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. What would you say, I guess, for that person that you were just talking about, and sort of going back to trying to sort of solve this issue down track of people wanting to get into the sector to maintain the growth and keeping it thriving? And I'm talking about everybody. I'm not just talking about engineers or software developers or software engineers, even people that are in sales or in marketing, in law, whatever it is, for someone who is trying to get into the space sector. What would you say are the best sort of resources that you've identified and been able to utilize over the years, whether it be courses or programs or mentors or whatever route to market was that kind of helped you transition into the space sector?
Yeah, I think that question might be a bit broader than what I was answering in the bullet point. So I'll start with my specific path that I think worked for me. And then I'll certainly speak to a broader opportunity, perhaps, among many people. So let me start with just how I got going. And I think one of the important things to consider is open-mindedness, curiosity, and versatility. And I'll use myself as an example. I couldn't decide on what major to do because it seemed like so many of them were asking me to specialize in something, a bit narrow right off. And so I wasn't happy with, being an electrical engineer or mechanical engineer or something else, that was specialized. And so what that meant is that I ended up in physics, which I think turned out very well for me because it gave me a lot of flexibility and breadth and a way of thinking that helped me along the way. That said, I think it is important, no matter who you are, to get good at something. You should pick something that you like to do and do it well. I would give that advice to anyone because that really trains your mind in how to solve difficult problems from stem to stern, from point A to point B. You don't want to be stuck as a generalist necessarily. However, you don't want to be stuck in specialization either. And so I would encourage people to think beyond what they've been trained in Don't get stuck in a specialty once you've mastered something or become good at something, because a lot of the innovation that I think is happening is multidisciplinary. It's understanding how to put different pieces together to make something work. So whether you're, planning on being a doctor or a lawyer or a business major, whatever it is, maintain that open-minded curiosity about the universe that will help you integrate different things together, and that'll be a differentiator, I think, for many people. Back to the aerospace industry in particular, I already mentioned the importance of hands-on work, and I think it's really important not to study things in abstraction, but to get your hands dirty. And given the demand going on in the industry right now, I think there's never been better opportunities for people from many different backgrounds, both professional and personal, to get involved. I guess I'll use an example in my own career. I was, in the academic circles working NASA funding, but I ended up working with a small nonprofit that you may have heard of called the Planetary Society. And never in my wildest imagination did I think that I would be working with them on both the Mars microphone, which was the first microphone sent to Mars, which unfortunately crashed, but we did get there, and also the Cosmos One solar sail. And these are bold initiatives from a member and donor-funded nonprofit that really exciting to participate in. And I think that space is opening up, to many other kinds of organizations outside of NASA, outside of the established players. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for people with multiple backgrounds in different areas. So, given that landscape, I would encourage anyone with interest to pursue those kinds of opportunities. I think that the door is open if you show commitment and you can weather, the failures and the storm, so to speak, and stay true to your inspiration. And from a business perspective, with all the space startups happening, there's never been a better time, for entrepreneurs. I think that we're seeing many more opportunities for observations that are going to help people in the science regime, different environments in which engineers can thrive. So I think that there's a much broader opportunity landscape, subject to keeping our kids inspired and engaged and making sure that they get there. And so I think that's one way to answer it. I can expand or go in a different direction, if I didn't quite cover it.
No, that's amazing. It's great to hear, and thank you for sharing that, because again, and the other side of the coin and the mission of these podcasts and these episodes is, yes, to make it accessible to everyone, but we also want it to be as either educational or resourceful to people that it's those people, like you mentioned it a couple of times in the episodes. It's some people that really, really, love the space industry from afar. They look from it through a very sort of complex lens and think that it's just beyond their reach. And exactly what you said earlier, they just, as soon as you hear space, I still get it now. I've been doing this for like over 4 years. When I go to family events, when I speak to close friends, as soon as I mention space, they just mention astronauts and rockets. That's the first thing that comes to their mind. So this is all about actually lifting the curtain on that and making it as resourceful for people as possible. And actually, our final question is that you've kind of answered it, but it was more kind of what advice, if I'm that person or somebody's out there listening to this, that, and again, regardless of background, regardless of industry skills, and they think, the space sector, I really want to get into it, but I just think it's beyond my reach. It's for scientists, it's for rocket scientists, it's for astronauts, it's for this, it's for that. What advice would you give to that person looking in from the outside, thinking, I want to get into the space sector in 2022 or beyond?
Yeah, I think I would emphasize again that we are in a very unique and, in my opinion, incredible time in the aerospace industry. I was a space scientist in my first career, and I never even imagined going into what I consider to be this sort of stable, I don't want to say boring, but not very inventive industry, given what government contractors are doing at that time. I thought I'd have a lot more freedom as a scientist to experiment and do all kinds of fun things than I did. But now I feel like the tables have turned, and you have an enormous what people are calling disruption in the aerospace industry. You have a lot of the established players, yes, but you have a record number of small companies being started, getting funded, and finding new and innovative ways to serve customers and develop new applications. So the opportunity is there. And I think that then it comes down to, being deeply inspired, being committed, understanding that titles and credentials, scientist, engineer, whatever it is, don't make the person necessarily useful. I think the way to frame this is that if I had two job applicants and one came from some very well-known school with very good grades in all the subject areas relevant to our business, and then I had another applicant who maybe went to a state school or some other school that had some good programs, but they did a hands-on project with a CubeSat. Okay, I'm going to pick the guy that or the girl that went and worked on the CubeSat because they learned something, they did something, and I think anyone can do that. You shouldn't be held back or have any hesitation because you might not have a particular degree or title after your name. I've known many people who become principal investigators of major missions that didn't get a PhD in physics or astronomy, but they were good at what they did and they stuck with it. I think that, and maybe you'll cut this out, but there's a NASA mission flying recently, headed up by a woman who I think was a single mom and didn't start going back to school until her 30s. There's all kinds of stories out there that should dissuade this notion that there's some child prodigy gate here to doing these endeavors. And I think it was harder before, but given the opportunity today, I would encourage anyone and everyone with commitment to find their authentic path, into this business. Planetary Society is one example. Worked with many people there. I think now that there are others being funded in all kinds of new and innovative ways. So,
absolutely, no, well said. Thank you ever so much. Well, that concludes our show. Greg, thank you ever so much for coming on EVONA Origin Story podcast today. Really, really appreciate your time. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.